Daniel Shaw adjusted his cufflinks, the platinum links glinting beneath the soft glow of chandeliers that hung like frozen raindrops from the ballroom ceiling. The air thrummed with polite applause as a violinist's bow danced across strings, weaving melodies that matched the elegance of the evening. This was his night, his empire's crown jewel gala, a testament to the billion-dollar empire he had built, brick by cold brick. And yet, beneath the tailored suit and charming smile, his chest felt like a vice, clamping tighter with every step. The gala had been meticulously planned, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers, floral arrangements perfuming the air with lilac and rose. Investors murmured approvingly. PR reps nodded, flashing perfect teeth. Everything, every detail existed to reinforce Daniel's image of absolute control. He was the man who had it all, the man who walked away from messy complications. Then, in the middle of the crowd, he saw her. Emily. She stood by the bar, a vision of calm elegance in a dark green satin dress that skimmed her figure with the ease of memory. Her hair, once tangled in his fingers on nights they'd laughed until dawn, now cascaded in smooth, practiced waves down her shoulders. But it wasn't her beauty that paralyzed him. It was the small framed photograph she held in her hands, clutching it like a talisman. A child's face. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. The world narrowed to the space between him and her, a chasm he had tried to bury under success and indifference. Guilt pooled in his gut, thick and bitter. His mind spat excuses. She's here to make a scene. She's here to ruin everything. She's here to destroy me. He tried to compose himself, straightening his posture, but his hands trembled as if the past had come alive to drag him down. He scanned the room for an escape, an easy exit to another conversation, another smiling face, but found none. Emily's eyes, soft yet steely, locked on his. And then she did the unthinkable. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of forgiveness. It was the kind of smile that cracked the foundation of every lie he'd ever told himself. A smile that said, "I know what you did. I know who you are." If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Memories, shattered pieces of a life he'd tried to erase, rushed back, her tear-streaked face the day he left, the echo of her voice in the empty apartment, asking him to stay, to fight, to be the man he claimed he could be. And then his own cowardice, signing the check he'd told himself was for her future, when in truth it was hush money, severance pay for the heart he'd broken. He swallowed, his mouth dry as paper. Emily raised the photograph slightly, her fingers trembling just enough for him to notice. The image, a boy with tousled hair, laughing eyes, and Daniel's own sharp jawline, stabbed him through the chest. 3 years had passed. Yet that face told him he had never really left. That child was his, and the truth loomed larger than any gala. The violinist shifted songs, the notes sliding into a minor key that felt too perfect, too staged. Daniel's heart thudded with the realization that his empire, his image, everything, was built on a lie that had just walked back into his life. He forced a breath, but his lungs refused to cooperate. Emily turned away, leaving him with the scent of her perfume, vanilla and something darker like regret. His world tilted, shadows creeping in where light had reigned moments before. In the distance, applause swelled as the CEO of a partner company took the stage. Daniel's assistant approached, whispering about press releases and social media posts, but his words faded into static. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on Emily's retreating silhouette as she disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a silence that roared. A voice in his mind whispered, "This isn't over." And he knew, with a bone-deep certainty that the gala's glare was only the beginning. Emily had returned with a purpose, and the carefully curated empire he had built would never be the same. Daniel stood rooted in place, the echo of Emily's perfume lingering long after she'd disappeared into the crowd. The applause and laughter, Around him blurred into a dull hum like static on a forgotten radio. He tried to focus on the gala's details, the gold-rimmed glasses, the laughter of his colleagues. But the edges of his world kept sliding out of focus, tilting toward memories he'd fought hard to bury. He hadn't expected to see her again. Not here, not now, not with that look in her eyes. Guilt gnawed at his stomach like a dog with a bone. "Your sins have shadows," the letter had said. But he hadn't needed a letter to remind him. Emily's eyes had done that perfectly. His mind tore open the boxes he'd sealed tight, spilling out memories that smelled of lavender and heartbreak. Emily, her hair damp with rain, pressing her forehead to his in their tiny apartment kitchen. Her laughter like wind chimes, delicate and unexpected. The nights they'd made love, their passion a temporary escape from the chaos of his ambition. The day she'd told him she was pregnant, her voice trembling with fear and hope. The memory of that day hit him like a train. He'd felt the panic. First, a tightening in his chest, a scream he'd swallowed so no one else could hear. A child, an anchor, a risk. He'd convinced himself he wasn't ready, that the empire he was building couldn't bear the weight of family. He'd told her he needed time. Then he'd told her he couldn't. And then he'd left. He'd left her standing in that apartment, her world crumbling around her, while he walked away to chase boardrooms and balance sheets. He'd left her with a check, a cold, calculated attempt at absolution. But money couldn't wash away the memory of her tears, or the tremor in her voice as she'd whispered, "I thought you loved me." He'd built walls around his guilt, reinforcing them with every $1 million deal. He'd told himself she'd be fine, that she was strong enough to handle it. But in the end, he hadn't been trying to save her. He'd been trying to save himself, and now, 3 years later, the walls were crumbling. Emily was back, and with her came a child whose face he couldn't forget. A child with his eyes, his smile. The thought of it made his hands tremble. His assistant appeared at his side, a polite smile frozen on his face. "Mr. Shaw, the keynote speaker is waiting to meet you." But the words were muffled, as if spoken underwater. Daniel nodded absently, waving him away. He needed air, something to drown out the thunder in his chest. He moved through the crowd like a ghost, his eyes searching for her. But she had vanished. The bar was empty now, the stool where she'd sat still warm. A tremor of panic laced his breath. Emily's smile hadn't been one of forgiveness. It had been a promise that the past he'd abandoned was coming for him. He leaned against a marble column, the chill of it grounding him for a moment. He needed answers. Why now? Why here? And that photograph, her proof that he hadn't outrun the past. The thought of that child of his own blood made the world tilt dangerously. Daniel clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. The guilt clawed at him, but a darker instinct rose to meet it. He had too much to lose now. His company, his reputation, everything he'd fought for. Emily couldn't be allowed to destroy it all. He'd find her. He'd talk to her. He'd make her see reason. He'd fix this somehow. The music changed, signaling the next part of the program. Daniel forced a breath, straightened his jacket, and stepped back into the gala, his face a mask of composure. But inside, his mind was a battlefield between guilt and survival, each memory a grenade waiting to detonate. And somewhere in that darkness, Emily's voice echoed like a ghost. "I thought you loved me." The violin's last note lingered like a sigh as Daniel maneuvered through the throng of guests, his mind a tangled knot of panic and resolve. Emily couldn't just walk into his world, his gala, carrying the past like a weapon. He needed answers, needed to regain control. Every step felt like crossing a minefield, but his feet carried him to her anyway. He found her near a marble pillar, her back to him, eyes fixed on the swirling crowd. A small smile played at the corner of her lips, calm, but defiant. Her fingers toyed with the photograph she'd shown him earlier, as if it were both shield and sword. "Emily," he said, his voice a rasp in the din. She turned, her eyes sharp, the color of storm clouds. For a moment, the years dissolved, and he was back in that small apartment watching her pack boxes with trembling hands. Daniel. She let his name hang in the air like an accusation. He took a breath. What are you doing here? Why now? The question sounded rehearsed, but they were all he had. Emily's gaze flicked to his hands, perfectly manicured, not a callus or scar to be seen. 3 years ago, she said, her voice calm but threaded with steel. You made a choice. You signed a check and called it closure, but you left more than me behind. Daniel's throat tightened. I thought you'd move on. I thought it was best for both of us. Her laugh, sharp, bitter, cut through him. Best for you, you mean? Her fingers clenched around the photograph. Did you ever wonder how I survived? How I raised your child alone? How I explained why his father disappeared like a coward? He recoiled as if struck. Emily. Don't, she snapped. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Don't you dare pretend you cared. You abandoned us. You abandoned him. And now you stand here with your billion-dollar empire expecting what? Gratitude? Forgiveness? Daniel tried to hold her gaze, but it felt like staring into a mirror that reflected everything he'd tried to forget. I didn't know how to handle it, he confessed, the words tasting like poison. I was building something. Building what? An empire? Or an excuse to run from your own humanity? Her voice dropped, trembling but unwavering. I'm not here to ruin your precious image, Daniel. I'm here because our son deserves the truth. And so do I. Her words landed, like hammer blows. He searched her face for weakness, some crack he could exploit, but found only resolve. What do you want from me? He demanded, voice low, desperate. Emily's eyes softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again. Justice, she said simply. For him, for me, for all the lies you told to protect yourself. A tremor ran through Daniel's chest. Justice? What does that even mean? His voice trembled now. Money? A trust fund? She shook her head, slow and final. It's not about money, Daniel. It's about acknowledging what you did, about owning your choices. You abandoned us, and you'll answer for that. Silence yawned between them. The music had shifted to a slower waltz, but it felt jarring, like the wrong soundtrack for a tragedy. Daniel's mind spun with calculations, how to salvage this, how to regain control, but the mask he'd worn for so long was cracking. Emily's gaze flicked over his shoulder, her expression unreadable. I'm not alone in this, she whispered, her tone low but potent. And you'll learn that soon enough. His stomach turned. What does that mean? But Emily was already stepping away, merging with the crowd, leaving him with the echo of her final words. Daniel watched her disappear, his mind a kaleidoscope of guilt, rage, and fear. The weight of her promise, I'm not alone in this, settled like a noose around his neck. And in that instant he knew. His carefully curated empire was crumbling, and the ghosts of his past were coming for him. Daniel arrived home long past midnight, his tie loosened and his mind a tangle of guilt and dread. The mansion, usually a sanctuary of silence and order, felt different tonight. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind against the window sent a chill down his spine. Emily's words echoed like a curse. You'll answer for that. He paused at the doorstep, fumbling with his keys. The lock clicked open, and he pushed the heavy oak door, expecting the comforting scent of polished wood and lavender. But tonight, the air smelled different, like rain and something darker. A thin white envelope lay on the marble floor, stark against the black and gold inlay. His name scrawled in red ink, the letters jagged and deliberate. He bent, fingers trembling, and picked it up. His breath caught. Inside, a single sheet of paper, no greeting, no signature, just a line of bold, cold letters. Your sins have shadows. The words crawled over his skin like insects, embedding themselves in his mind. Shadows. His sins. He could still feel Emily's eyes boring into him, still taste the bitterness of her accusations. But this, This was different. Someone else knew. Someone who wasn't Emily. Someone who wanted him to know they were watching. He sank onto the staircase, the envelope crumpling in his fist. The Gala had been a battlefield, but at least he'd known his enemy. Now the enemy was faceless, a phantom that knew his darkest secrets and was willing to expose them. His thoughts tangled like barbed wire. Who else could know? The child? His child was a secret he'd buried under years of ambition and denial. Emily had her reasons for seeking justice, but this letter was something else. A threat, or a promise. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, cold as ice. He thought of Emily's last words. I'm not alone in this. Had she found an ally? A lawyer? A journalist? Or worse, someone who wanted more than justice? He tried to steady his breath, but it came in ragged gasps. His mind darted to the empire he'd built, his company, his board, the investors who believed in his perfect story. A scandal would burn it all to the ground. His hands trembled, the paper rattling like dry leaves. He rose and moved to the window, drawing back the heavy drapes. Moonlight spilled across the lawn, painting shadows that stretched like accusing fingers toward the house. He saw nothing but darkness beyond the iron gate, yet felt eyes on him all the same. The silence roared. His phone buzzed on the hall table, but he ignored it. For the first time in years, Daniel felt powerless, a man adrift in the storm he had created. He clenched, his jaw. He couldn't let this shadowy threat unmake him. He needed answers. He needed control. And if Emily thought she could destroy him with half-truths and guilt, she'd underestimated how far he'd go to protect what was his. In the distance, the grandfather clock struck 1, each chime a dull hammer beat in the night. He glanced at the letter again. Your sins have shadows. The words etched themselves into his mind, deeper than any wound. His reflection in the glass stared back, pale, uncertain. The empire he'd built on ambition and denial had always seemed unshakable. But tonight shadows stretched long and cold, and for the first time Daniel feared they might swallow him whole. He turned from the window, the envelope still clutched tight. One thought blazed through his mind, bright as lightning in the darkness. He would find out who was behind this, and he would silence them, whatever it took. The letter lay on Daniel's mahogany desk like a loaded gun. Your sins have shadows. The words pressed on his chest, heavier than any corporate failure or market crash. He paced the office, moonlight, slicing through the blinds and striping the floor like prison bars. His eyes caught his reflection in the glass, a man in a tailored suit, every hair in place, eyes dark and haunted. For a moment he didn't recognize the figure staring back. Was this the man who'd built an empire from dust? Or was it the coward who'd left Emily standing in that apartment with tears on her cheeks and a baby in her belly? He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. The reflection blurred, warping into memories he'd buried so deep they sometimes felt like dreams. Emily's voice, soft but edged with pain, came rushing back. I thought you loved me. Did he? Love her? Or did he love what she made him feel, like a hero in a story he'd written for himself? But when the pregnancy test turned pink, reality had cracked the fantasy. He'd chosen his company, his ambition, his freedom. He'd chosen himself. And in that moment, he'd become the man in the mirror, smiling but empty. He slammed his fist on the desk, the pain sharp and immediate. It grounded him. It reminded him of who he was, Daniel Shaw, CEO, a man who took what he wanted and paid the price later. But lately, the price felt higher than he'd ever imagined. A shadow shifted in his mind, and his mother's voice slithered in like smoke. Daniel, a man can't be tied down. Love is a liability. Control is everything. She'd taught him to keep emotions locked away like dangerous weapons. She'd taught him that vulnerability was weakness, and he'd believed her. Until Emily, he let out a shaky breath, staring at the mirror's cold gaze. The memories of his mother's scornful smile, the way she'd dismissed Emily as a distraction, still burned. She'll ruin you, she'd warned, her voice honeyed with poison. No one will love you for who you really are. They'll just use you, and then they'll leave. He'd believed that too, and so he'd left first. Now, with the letter's threat, and Emily's eyes seared into his mind, he wondered if he'd been the villain all along. A man who built walls so high that even love couldn't find a way in. A man who'd traded warmth for power and connection for control. He pressed his forehead to the cool glass, sweat dripping down his temple. The reflection blurred again, splitting him into fragments. A husband he never was. A father he'd never met. A boy still seeking his mother's approval. The guilt, the fear, the anger. They tangled together until he couldn't tell where. One ended and the other began. But even in the darkness, a spark of defiance flickered. He couldn't let Emily, and whoever was helping her, tear down everything he'd built. He would find them. He would stop them. The empire might be built on shadows, but it was still his. In the mirror, his reflection seemed to nod in agreement, a pact with the devil he'd become. He straightened his tie, smoothing his mask back into place. The world wouldn't see the cracks. Not yet. He turned from the window, the envelope still searing in his hand. Shadows or not, he would fight. Even if that meant fighting himself. Somewhere, in the night, a phone vibrated, a name he hadn't seen in years flashing on the screen. His mother. And with that single ring, the shadows thickened. Emily sipped her lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste settling on her tongue like an unwelcome truth. The cafe was nearly empty, its dim corners and peeling wallpaper a far cry from Daniel's glittering world. A flickering neon sign outside cast a trembling glow through the window, painting her face in shifting blues and reds. Sarah sat across from her, leaning back with the easy confidence of someone used to other people's secrets. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight braid, her sharp eyes scanning the room as though even the shadows couldn't be trusted. "He's rattled," Emily murmured, her voice steady but her hands trembling as they clutched the photograph of her son. "You should have seen his face when I showed him this." Sarah's gaze softened as she reached for the photo. A boy with messy hair and Daniel's defiant jawline. "He's got his father's eyes," she said, handing it back. "But let's hope he gets your heart." Emily managed a sad smile. "That's why we're here, Sarah, because he deserves the truth, and so do I. I'm done letting Daniel control the narrative." She paused, eyes glistening. "I raised that boy alone. I carried the weight of every sleepless night, every question he asked that I couldn't answer." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And now you're ready to expose him. But this won't be easy. Daniel Shaw is powerful, connected. He didn't build that empire by being honest." Emily leaned forward, her tone steely. "I know who he is, Sarah. I've lived it. The manipulation, the lies, the way he made me doubt my own worth. I'm done playing his game." She traced the rim of her cup with her finger, the movement steady despite the tremor in her heart. "I've got you. I've got the documents, the hush money transfers, the corporate shell games. It's enough to burn his empire to the ground." Sarah arched an eyebrow. "And the press conference?" Emily's eyes hardened. "Yes, he thinks he can hide behind lawyers and boardrooms. But the truth, our son's truth, deserves to be seen. I want the world to see the man behind the mask. I want him to know he can't bury us again." Sarah's smile was thin, but approving. "You've come a long way since that first phone call. You were so scared back then, afraid he'd find out." Emily's throat tightened at the memory. "I was scared," she admitted. "But I'm not anymore. This is my story too, and I won't let him silence me." She took a deep breath, the weight of years lifting, if only for a moment. "He tried to erase us, Sarah, but the past doesn't just disappear. It leaves shadows, just like his letter said." Sarah's eyes glinted. "And we're going to make sure those shadows come to light. But be ready. Daniel won't go down without a fight." Emily nodded. "I'm ready." She clutched the photograph tighter. For My son. For myself. For the truth. Outside, the neon sign flickered again, casting the cafe into a brief darkness before reigniting. It felt symbolic, an omen that even the darkest nights end with light. Sarah stood, collecting her files and notes. "Then let's get to work," she said, her voice low and firm. "He won't see us coming." As Emily followed her out, a storm churned inside her, equal parts fear and determination. She could almost feel Daniel's eyes on her, lurking in the shadows. But she wasn't alone anymore. And this time, she wouldn't be silenced. Daniel's office glowed in the early hours, the skyline outside his window awash in the first light of dawn. The hush of the empty building was a comfort. No interruptions, no forced smiles, just silence and the ticking of a clock that marked every second he had left to get ahead of Emily's plans. But even the silence felt different now. As he flipped through spreadsheets and contract files, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that shadows lingered just beyond the glass, watching, judging. He scrolled past the latest quarterly report, the numbers a blur. For years they'd been his armor, the proof of his success. But now every line felt fragile, a house of cards waiting to collapse. He slammed the laptop shut, the echo sharp in the stillness. His phone buzzed. A message from his CFO, terse and direct. Board member requesting urgent meeting. Rumors about hush money. We need damage control. Daniel's stomach twisted. Emily's ally, whoever she was, had started the fires. And now the board, his own board, was circling like sharks. He rubbed his temples, sweat beading at his hairline. The door creaked open, and Marcus, his right-hand man, stepped inside, his expression tight. "Boss, I just got wind of something. There's talk that Emily's hired a PI, and that she's got documents linking you to the payoffs." He hesitated. "If the board finds out before you control the narrative, then I'm finished." Daniel muttered, the words tasting like acid. He rose, crossing to the window, the city stretching out below him like a chessboard. "She's playing a dangerous game." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Some of the board members are already asking questions. They want answers about these payouts. They're worried it could tank the merger with Centec." Daniel's jaw tightened. The merger, the biggest deal of his career, was already teetering on the edge. A scandal would send investors running and leave his empire in ruins. He turned, back to Marcus, his eyes cold. "I built this company from nothing. I won't let Emily or anyone destroy it." Marcus swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" Daniel's mind churned. Emily's threats, the board's suspicions, the shadows that now crept through every corner of his life. He couldn't let this get out of control. "I want you to find out exactly what Emily has," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Every document, every contact, and I want to know who's helping her. I want them neutralized before this explodes." Marcus hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Daniel, if this gets out, then we're both finished," Daniel snapped. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder, his grip tight. "We're not going to let that happen. Do whatever it takes." Marcus nodded, but his eyes lingered on Daniel's hand, then flicked away. "Understood." He turned to leave. Daniel exhaled slowly, his pulse a steady drumbeat of fear and rage. Emily's defiance had set something in motion, something he couldn't stop with a check or a polished statement. He glanced at his reflection in the glass, pale, haunted, a man staring into the abyss. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "Sarah's name keeps coming up. She's the PI. She's digging deep." Daniel's hand clenched. Sarah. So that was her name. He made a mental note, the rage simmering under his skin. He would deal with her, just like he'd dealt with every other threat. Outside, the city began to stir, unaware of the storm brewing in its tallest tower. Daniel squared his shoulders. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as the sun rose, Daniel's empire braced for a reckoning he could no longer avoid. The sky had shifted to a bruised gray when Sarah stepped into her cramped office, the folder in her hand like a ticking time bomb. She tossed, Her rain-soaked coat over the chair and settled behind her desk, her eyes tracing the neat rows of numbers and transactions. Each line was a thread in a web Daniel had spun, one he'd never expected anyone to untangle. Emily sat opposite her, her eyes sharp but tired. The photograph of her son rested on the table between them, a silent reminder of what was at stake. "Are you sure this is enough?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah flipped the page, her finger landing on a line item, $50,000 transferred to a shell company in the Caymans. "It's more than enough. These hush money payments, some marked as consulting fees, are your smoking gun. He's been laundering his guilt, trying to keep you and the boy hidden in the shadows. But the shadows have teeth." Emily's lips trembled. "I can't believe I ever loved that man. I was so blind." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You were in love. Love makes fools of us all. But now you're in control." Emily swallowed, her resolve hardening. "What's the plan?" Sarah's eyes glinted with determination. "We bring it to him, face to face. No lawyers, no spin. We drop this on his desk and make him look into the eyes of the woman he tried to destroy." She paused. "But I need you to be ready. Once we do this, there's no turning back." Emily nodded, her jaw set. He made his choices. It's time he faces them. She took a deep breath. "When?" Sarah checked her watch. "He'll be in his office tonight, late meetings, merger prep. We'll catch him when he's alone, that way there's no PR team to shield him. Just him, and the truth." Emily's heart thudded in her chest. What if he denies it? What if he tries to twist it like he always does? Sarah leaned back, her eyes cold and steady. "Then we show him the numbers, the transfers, his signature. The ledger doesn't lie." She tapped the folder, the sound sharp and final. "He can't gaslight his way out of this." Emily exhaled slowly, the weight of 3 years pressing on her shoulders. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's finish this." An hour later, they stepped into the gleaming marble lobby of Shawtech's headquarters. The security guard barely looked up as Sarah flashed her PI badge, waving them through. Emily's palms were slick with sweat as the elevator hummed to life, carrying them to the top floor, the lion's den. The hallway was silent, the doors dark and polished. Sarah knocked once, firm and unyielding. A pause. Then the door creaked open. Daniel stood there, his tie loosened, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and defiance. "Emily," he said, his voice calm but brittle. "I assume this isn't a social call." Emily's hand trembled as she thrust the folder at him. "Read it," she said. "Look at every number, every lie you buried. This is who you really are." Daniel's face paled as he flipped through the pages, his mask cracking with each line. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah's voice was a dagger. "Your sins have shadows, Daniel, and we're done living in them." Daniel's eyes darted between them, rage and fear warring behind the mask. The empire he'd built was crumbling, one blood-stained ledger at a time. Emily took a step back, her resolve hard as steel. "You can't run from this. Not anymore." And as the clock on the wall ticked, Daniel's world began to unravel. Daniel's office felt colder than usual, the sterile air pressing in on him like a vice. The folder Emily had thrust at him sat open on his desk, its pages splayed like a wound. Numbers, names, signatures, evidence that not even his wealth could erase. Shadows of betrayal danced in the corners of the room, and Daniel felt them closing in. Emily stood across from him, arms folded tight across her chest, her chin raised in defiance. The woman he once thought he could bend to his will now looked unbreakable. Sarah lingered near the door, her sharp eyes a silent promise of consequences. "I trusted you," Daniel muttered, though the words felt hollow even as he said them. "I gave you everything you needed." Emily laughed bitterly. "You gave me a check to buy my silence. You gave me a son who asks every night why his father doesn't love him. You gave me nothing but shadows." Her voice cracked, but she didn't flinch. Daniel's hands trembled as he turned a page in the ledger. Each transaction glared back at him, proof of his cowardice, his betrayal. You don't understand the pressure I was under. My mother, Emily's eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare blame her. You made the choice to leave. You made the choice to hide your own child like he was some mistake you could pay to forget. He swallowed, the words catching in his throat. I thought I was protecting him. From me. From my world. Sarah stepped forward. And what a world it is, Daniel. Lies. Betrayals. Hush money. That's not protection. That's manipulation. Daniel's gaze darted between them, his mind a labyrinth of excuses that suddenly felt too thin to hold. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered. I never wanted to hurt him. Emily's jaw tightened. But you did. Her voice was steady, though her eyes shimmered. Every time you chose your empire over your family, every time you signed a check instead of picking up the phone, you hurt us. Daniel's composure cracked like glass. What do you want from me? His voice trembled. Money? An apology? What can I do to make this right? Emily shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I don't want your money, Daniel. I want you to own what you did. I want you to look your son in the eye and tell him the truth. I want you to stop hiding behind your empire and face the man you really are. A silence filled the room, heavy as concrete. Daniel's mind reeled with the weight of every choice he'd made, every lie he'd told. His mother's voice hissed in his ear. A man doesn't show weakness. But as he met Emily's eyes, he saw the strength she carried, forged in the fires of his betrayal. Sarah's voice sliced through the quiet. You have until tomorrow to come clean, Daniel. To the board, to the press, or we will. You've hidden long enough. Daniel's world tilted. The empire he'd built now felt like a prison, every dollar a bar in a cage he'd crafted himself. He felt his mother's shadow at his back, smiling, cold, triumphant. Control is everything. Emily wiped her tears, her eyes fierce. This ends now, Daniel. No more shadows. As she turned to leave, Daniel felt the last thread of control slip through his fingers. The past had come to collect its debt, and this time, no amount of money could buy his freedom. The conference room pulsed with the murmur of reporters, their cameras and notepads ready to capture the fall of an empire. The air felt electric, like a storm about to break. Daniel's name was on every tongue, his story on every screen. But he was nowhere to be seen. Emily sat in the front row, her heart a hammer in her chest. Her hand trembled as she clutched the small framed photo of her son, the one she had shown Daniel at the gala. This was it, the moment when the truth would claw its way into the light. Sarah stood beside her, eyes scanning the crowd for threats. She'd warned Emily that Daniel might try something, damage control, a lawyered-up statement, maybe even a last-minute bribe. But Emily had been resolute. No more running. No more hiding. The room went silent as the podium microphone crackled, to life. A hush fell over the journalists. Emily's breath caught. It was time. A moderator cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Ms. Emily Carter has a statement regarding Mr. Daniel Shaw. Emily stood, her legs trembling but her resolve unshakable. She stepped up to the microphone, the bright light searing her eyes. She blinked, willing her voice to stay steady. 3 years ago, she began, Daniel Shaw left me alone with a child he refused to acknowledge. He built his empire on lies, manipulation, and fear he projected onto everyone around him. But today, that ends. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily held up the framed photograph. This is my son, Daniel's son, a boy who has the right to know who his father really is. A boy who deserves the truth. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Emily's voice cracked with emotion. Daniel tried to erase us, bury us with hush money and threats. But no amount of money can bury the truth forever. And no empire stands when it's built on betrayal. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. I'm here today not to destroy Daniel's company, but to reclaim my son's right to the truth. Daniel Shaw is not the man he pretends to be, and I refuse to let his lies shape my son's future. Sarah stepped forward, holding a thick folder of documents. We have evidence. Bank transfers, emails, signatures, proof of hush money and cover-ups. She dropped the folder onto the podium. This is not a personal vendetta. This is a reckoning. A hush fell over the crowd, the only sound the clicking of cameras capturing the moment Daniel Shaw's empire began to crumble. Suddenly, the back doors swung open. Daniel stood there, his face pale but defiant. The room turned as one. His gaze locked with Emily's, a storm of emotions swirling in his eyes. Fear, rage, regret. Emily, he said, his voice hoarse, carrying across the silent room. Don't do this. She met his stare, her own eyes fierce. This isn't about me anymore, it's about the truth. About our son. Her voice softened, but only slightly. You can't hide from this, Daniel. Not anymore. Daniel's mouth opened, but the words died on his tongue. The cameras turned, capturing his hesitation, his vulnerability, a side of him the world had never seen. Emily turned back to the microphone, her voice strong. No more shadows, no more lies. The world deserves the truth, and so does my son. The room erupted into questions and flashes, but Daniel just stood there, a man brought to his knees by his own past. And as the chaos swelled, Emily knew she'd finally taken back the power he'd stolen from her. Daniel's penthouse apartment felt like a mausoleum, each step echoing in the cold marble halls. The press conference had ended hours ago, but the words still reverberated in his head. No more shadows. No more lies. Emily's voice had cut through him like a blade, each syllable stripping away the last defenses he'd built to protect himself from the truth. He sank into the leather chair by the window. The city, skyline a blur of lights that no longer brought comfort. His phone buzzed with calls he couldn't bear to answer. Lawyers, board members, PR teams, all wanting to salvage what was left of his empire. But Daniel knew, deep down, that it was over. His mother's voice, cold and unyielding, echoed in his mind. Control is everything, Daniel. Never show weakness, but tonight weakness was all he felt. His mother's lessons had carried him this far, but they'd also cost him everything that mattered. Emily, his son, his own sense of self. A single framed photo caught his eye, tucked on a side table. It was from years ago, back when success was just a dream. He and Emily, arms around each other, their faces soft with laughter and possibility. He traced the glass with a trembling finger, the man in that photo unrecognizable now. That man had believed love was enough. This man knew, better or thought he did. A knock on the door jolted him. He hesitated, then forced himself to stand. When he opened the door, no one was there. Just an envelope on the floor, the paper stark against the polished wood. He bent and picked it up, heart thudding. Inside, a letter written in a neat, deliberate, and Daniel, you've lost the empire, but you've also lost yourself. I hope one day you'll understand the cost of the choices you made. For now, let this be your freedom from the shadows you created. Emily, he closed his eyes, a tear sliding down his cheek. Freedom. It was a word he'd used to justify every betrayal, every calculated move. But now, alone, and stripped of everything he'd built, he wondered if he'd ever been free at all. He turned to the window, the city lights blurry through his tears. Emily's strength had broken his illusions and forced him to see himself for what he truly was. A man who'd run from love, from responsibility, from the only thing that might have saved him. In the silence, he whispered, I'm sorry. But the walls didn't answer. And the night offered no absolution. Below, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the man who once thought he owned it. And as the minutes stretched, Daniel realized that the cost of freedom wasn't paid in money or power. It was paid in every lost moment, every lie that had kept him from the truth. Emily stood by the window of her small apartment, the first rays of morning light painting the room in soft gold. The city below stirred awake, the muted thrum of traffic and birdsong blending into a quiet symphony. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. She turned and watched her son, asleep on the couch, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His hair was a tousled halo, and his tiny fist clutched the corner of his blanket like a shield. Emily's heart swelled with fierce love and quiet triumph. He was safe. He was hers. The press conference had been a crucible, but she'd emerged from it stronger, her voice no longer buried under Daniel's lies. The evidence was out in the open, the truth no longer hers to carry alone. Daniel's empire might crumble, but she no longer cared. What mattered was that her son would grow up knowing who he was, and that he came from a mother who would never let him be a secret. She padded across the kitchen, brewing coffee as the sun rose higher. The bitterness of it no longer tasted like regret. It tasted like resilience. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Sarah. "You did it. I'm proud of you." Emily smiled, her fingers brushing the screen. Sarah had been her anchor in the storm, her ally, her friend. And now, with the worst behind them, Emily felt the first flicker of something she hadn't dared hope for in years. Possibility. She set the cup down and sat beside her son, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. He stirred, eyes blinking open to find her there. "Mama," he murmured sleepily. She leaned down, pressing a kiss to his temple. "I'm here," she whispered. "Always." Outside, the world moved on. Daniel would face the consequences of his choices, of the empire he'd built on betrayal. Emily had no illusions about what lay ahead. There would be questions, judgments, whispers in the shadows. But she would not hide. She would not let fear steal her voice again. She glanced at the small framed photo on the table. Her son's first birthday, frosting on his cheeks and laughter in his eyes, a moment she'd carried alone for so long, now a testament to everything she'd survived. As the sun rose higher, Emily breathed in the quiet strength of the new day. She had faced the ghosts of her past and walked through the fire of the truth. And though the scars still ached, they were hers to carry, reminders that she was more than the sum of what Daniel had tried to make her. She lifted her son into her arms, feeling the warmth of his small body against her chest. "Ready for breakfast?" she asked, her voice soft but sure. He nodded, eyes bright with trust. And as they moved into the kitchen together, Emily knew that this was her new dawn, a life reclaimed from the shadows, a promise that no matter what storms might come, she would stand, unbroken and unafraid.